The Wyoming wind does not whisper here. It screams. It tears across the high plains, stripping the moisture from the sagebrush and driving grit into the cracks of rough-hewn timber. But inside the box, the wind is only a distant vibration in the wood. The air here is still, heavy, and smelling of pine sap and unwashed terror. A young woman, no older than 20, lies curled in the darkness.
Her knees are pulled tight against her chest, her spine pressed against the rough grain of the lid. This is not a cell, it is a crate, barely larger than a coffin, sitting exposed in the yard behind the main house. The heat of the day has turned the interior into a kiln, baking the oxygen out of the tiny space. Her knuckles are raw, the skin broken and bleeding from hours of scratching at the wood, a frantic animal attempt to find a weakness in the carpentry. But now she is still. She has learned the first lesson of this place. Panic burns air, and air is a finite resource. Through the slats, muffled and distorted, comes the sound of a piano. It plays a jaunty, out-of-tune melody, punctuated by the raucous laughter of men and the clinking of glass. It is the sound of a party, a celebration of freedom and frontier spirit, happening just 50 feet away. But for her, it is the soundtrack of a burial. Inside the main house, a man sits at a table. He does not look out the window. He is focused on a book lying open before him, a heavy, grease-stained ledger. He dips a pen into an inkwell and carefully traces a line of figures. He adds the cost of the lumber for the crate. He adds the lost wages from her absence on the floor. He adds the price of the water she will beg for when they finally let her out. With a calm, bureaucratic scratch of the nib, he ensures that her time in the box isn't just punishment, it is a transaction. This is not the Wild West of gunslingers and glory. This is a machine, a meticulously organized, state-sanctioned engine of human ownership that operated in the shadow of the American flag. If you want to uncover the stories that history books tried to burn, the accounts that were buried in unmarked graves, make sure you are subscribed. We are going to open the ledger. To understand how a woman ends up in a box on the edge of the frontier, you have to look at the map. In the 1870s, the American West is a patchwork of territories and jurisdictions, but power is concentrated in the forts. Fort Laramie, Fort Fetterman, Fort Hayes. These are the islands of civilization, where the bugle calls time, the flag snaps in the breeze, and the United States Army enforces order. The fort is the center of the world. It represents safety, law, and moral rectitude. But stand at the sentry gate of Fort Laramie and look out. Past the parade grounds, past the neatly whitewashed barracks, past the line of the sentries. Fix your eyes on the horizon, exactly 3 miles away. That distance is not random. It is a calculated legal measurement. The jurisdiction of the post commander extends for 3 miles in every direction. Within that circle, the Army is the police, the judge, and the jury. But at 3 miles and 1 foot, the Army's authority vanishes. It is a legal vacuum, a dead zone.
And sitting right there, straddling that invisible line like a vulture waiting for scraps, is the Hog Ranch. From a distance, it looks like a stain on the prairie. There are no whitewashed walls here. The structures are built from sod, bricks of dirt cut from the earth and topped with roofs of tangled brush and mud. A perimeter of broken whiskey bottles glints in the sun, a jagged warning to anyone approaching. The ground is beaten flat, devoid of grass, coated in a layer of dust that tastes of manure and stale alcohol. This is the architecture of exploitation. The Hog Ranch was designed with the precision of a trap. It is close enough for a soldier to ride to on a payday pass, but far enough that the commanding officer can claim he sees nothing. It is a satellite of the fort, feeding off its economy, servicing its vices, and existing entirely at its pleasure. In the fort, men salute and speak of honor. In the ranch, The only law is the ledger, and the ledger is always hungry. Most of the women who found themselves staring at those sod walls did not start as criminals or outcasts. They started as dreamers in the crowded, soot-stained cities of the East. We have to go back to the beginning, to a train platform in Omaha or Kansas City or St. Louis. The steam engines hiss, shrouding the station in white clouds, and through the mist steps a man. He is dressed in a sharp suit, perhaps a little dusty at the hem, but his voice is smooth, polished like a river stone. He gathers a small group of women. They are young, many of them widows of the Civil War or daughters of farms that collapsed under debt. They are Irish, German, Swedish, immigrants who came to America for a new life and found only poverty. The man holds up a newspaper. The advertisement is circled in ink. It promises high wages, respectable work. Waitresses wanted, it says. Dance hall companions needed for the Western Territories. Room and board provided. He speaks to them of the West, not as a dangerous wilderness, but as a land of golden opportunity. He tells them of lonely miners and soldiers who will pay $1 just for a smile, just for a dance. He paints a picture of independence, of saving enough money in a year to buy a house, to bring their families over, to be free. Then he makes the gesture that seals their fate. He reaches into his coat and pulls out a sheaf of tickets, train tickets, stagecoach passes. He hands them out with a benevolent smile, like a father gifting sweets to children. "Don't worry about the cost," he says gently. "I'll cover it. You can pay me back when you're settled, small installments." The women take the tickets. Their hands tremble with gratitude. They believe they have just been given a gift. They do not see the invisible ink drying on the paper. They do not realize that the moment their fingers touch that ticket, a new page has been opened in the leather-bound book back in Wyoming. The cost of the ticket is entered, then a fee for the agent, then a surcharge for the arrangement. Before the train has even lurched out of the station, before they have watched the green forests fade into the brown, endless monotony of the plains, they are already owned. The wheels of the train click rhythmically against the track, measuring out the miles, each mile adding to a sum they will never be allowed to calculate. The journey takes weeks. The anticipation builds, mixed with a growing, gnawing unease as the towns become smaller, the faces rougher, the landscape more hostile. When the wagon finally creaks to a halt, it is not in front of a grand hotel or a bustling dance hall. It is in front of the sod hovels of the Hog Ranch. The wind kicks up dust that coats their travel clothes. They step down, looking for the town, but there is no town. There is only the fort in the distance, and this squalid outpost in the middle of nowhere. The man who greets them is not the charming recruiter. It is the proprietor. He is often a former soldier, a man hardened by the frontier, with eyes that assess them not as people, but as livestock. He does not smile. He gestures to the cribs, a row of shacks attached to the back of the bar. They are windowless. They are 6 feet by 8 feet. They have no ventilation. He takes their bags. "For safekeeping," he says. It is not a request. Then he invites them into the main room, clears a space on the table, and opens the book. The ritual of intake is cold and mathematical. He reads aloud the debt they have already accrued. The train ticket? It cost 3 times what they thought. The stagecoach? Exorbitant. The food they ate on the journey? All recorded. He looks at their travel clothes, simple cotton dresses, dusty and worn. "It can't work in those," he says. He points to a rack of gaudy, cheap satin dresses, the fabric thin and scratchy. "You need these, $5 a day rental or $50 to buy." One of the women, perhaps the bravest, speaks up. She protests. She says this wasn't the agreement. She says she wants to leave. The proprietor doesn't yell. He doesn't need to. He simply turns the book around so she can see the number at the bottom of the column. "You owe me $400, he says calmly. "You can leave when the balance is zero. Until then, you work." If she continues to argue, the violence is sudden and precise, a backhand to the face, shocking in its speed. It is not a blow of passion, it is a correctional measure, like striking a mule that refuses to plow. She is shown to her crib. There is a cot, a wash basin with gray water, and a door that locks from the outside. As the key turns, the reality settles in with the darkness. They are not employees, they are inventory. The ink on the page is still wet, and the interest has already begun to accrue.
Life in the Hog Ranch settles into a grim, cyclical rhythm, punctuated only by the arrival of the U.S. Army. But the soldiers did not come to liberate, and once a month a different kind of visitor arrives. A buggy pulls up, and a man steps out wearing the pristine blue uniform of a medical officer. He carries a black bag and a clipboard. This is the post surgeon. The women are ordered out of their cribs and lined up in the main room. The air is thick with smoke and the smell of stale beer. The surgeon does not ask them how they're treated. He does not ask about the bruises on their arms or the hollowness in their cheeks. He is not here for their welfare. He is here for medical regulation. The Army knows the hog ranches exist. In fact, the Army relies on them. A bored garrison is a dangerous garrison. The commanders believe that without these outlets, the soldiers would desert or turn on each other. So they tolerate the ranches, provided they do not damage the government's property. And the soldiers are the property. The surgeon moves down the line. The examination is humiliating, swift, and public. He checks them for venereal disease with the same detached efficiency a quartermaster uses to inspect rifles for rust. He consults a list of names provided by the ranch owner. If a woman is deemed clean, she is marked in his book and cleared for duty. If she is found to be infected, she is not taken to the Fort Hospital. She is not given medicine. She is ordered into quarantine. She is locked in her crib, unable to work, but the debt does not pause for sickness. The owner charges her for the room she occupies while she is ill. He charges her for the food she eats while she recovers. He charges her a fine for loss of business. We see the exchange of glances between the officer and the ranch owner, a nod of understanding, a shared cigar. They are partners in this ecosystem. The Army needs the ranch to maintain morale. The ranch needs the Army's protection to operate. The women are merely the friction material between these two grinding gears of the state, slowly worn down until they are discarded. But the human spirit is not easily extinguished. Even in the depths of the system, there is the impulse for freedom. It is night. The moon is a sliver over the prairie, offering just enough light to see the silhouette of the distant fort. The woman from the box, weeks before her punishment, finds a loose board at the back of her crib. She has been working on it for days, silently prying the nails loose with a stolen spoon. She waits until the piano is loud, until the shouts of the drinkers reach a crescendo. She pushes the board aside and squeezes through the gap. The cool night air hits her face, smelling of sage and damp earth, the smell of freedom. She does not look back. She runs. The prairie grass whips at her legs, tearing her stockings. Her breath burns in her lungs. The 3 miles feel like 300. Every shadow looks like a rider. Every gust of wind sounds like a shout. But ahead, the lights of Fort Laramie glow like a beacon. Safety, law, the United States. She reaches the sentry gate, gasping, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. She grabs the iron bars. A guard steps out, startled, his rifle lowered. She begs him for sanctuary. She tells him she is being held against her will, that she is enslaved.
The guard hesitates. He calls for the officer of the day. The officer arrives, buttoning his coat, annoyed at the disturbance. He looks at the woman, disheveled, hysterical, terrified. Then he looks past her, into the darkness. He hears the hoofbeats before she does. The ranch owner's men are approaching, stopping their ponies exactly at the 3-mile marker. They do not cross. They know the rules. The officer looks at the men, then back at the woman. He knows the regulations. He knows that involving the military in a civilian dispute, even one involving slavery, is a political minefield his commander wants to avoid. He cites the jurisdiction. "This is a civil matter," he says, his voice flat. "You are outside the post." He orders the gate secured. The heavy timber doors slam shut. The sound echoes across the flat land like a gunshot, final and absolute. She is left on the wrong side of the wood. The lights of the fort are now just slivers through the cracks. She turns to face the darkness where the men are uncoiling their ropes. The betrayal is total. The institution she ran to for salvation has just handed her back to her executioners. Back at the ranch, the punishment is physical, but the true destruction is psychological. After the box, after the beatings, comes the conversation. The owner sits her down. He opens the ledger again. He is not angry. He is disappointed, he says. He explains the math. The men he had to send to retrieve her, they require wages. The horse that went lame during the chase, that is on her bill. The damage to the crib wall, that must be repaired. Her debt, which was $400, is now $800. "You're never going to leave," he says softly, "so you might as well get comfortable." This is the breaking point, the moment the light goes out behind the eyes. To cope with the reality of a debt that grows faster than she can work, she turns to the only relief available. The ranch sells spirits, watered down and laced with tobacco juice to give it a kick. They sell numbing tinctures. They sell the quieting drops. She drinks to forget the day. The owner charges her double for the bottle. She needs a new dress because the old one is torn. He adds it to the book at a 500% markup. It is a spiral of dependency designed to be inescapable. We see the physical toll, the trembling hands that can no longer hold a cup, the hollows under the eyes that no amount of paint can hide, the vacant stare that looks through the customers, not at them. The crib becomes her entire universe. The women stop talking about their families back east. They stop looking at the horizon. They stop planning. They exist only in the present tense, this drink, this customer, this dollar. The ledger has become more real than their own memories. It defines their past, controls their present, and has already sold their future. Winter on the high plains is a killer. The wind chill drops to 40 below. The sod walls of the ranch freeze solid. Inside the cribs, the women huddle under thin blankets, coughing. Sickness moves through the ranch like wildfire. Fever, lung rot, exhaustion, and the toll of the trade. A woman dies. It is not a dramatic death. There is no shootout. She simply doesn't wake up one morning. She is worn out, like a piece of machinery that has been run without oil for too long. There is no funeral. There is no letter written to her family in Ohio or New York. To the owner, she is a liability that must be liquidated. Two men take shovels and go out into the frozen field a few hundred yards from the ranch. They do not dig deep. The ground is too hard. They avoid the consecrated ground of the military cemetery 3 miles away. That is for heroes. This is for the discarded. They bury her in a shallow depression and pile stones on top to keep the coyotes away. Back inside, the owner opens the ledger to her page. He takes a ruler and a thick pen. He draws a single, heavy black line across the page. "Written off," he mutters. "Bad debt." Her few belongings, a comb, a locket, the dress, are collected. They are not sent home. They are cleaned and put back in the inventory, ready for the next girl who steps off the wagon. Outside, the wind begins to blow snow over the fresh dirt. Within hours, the scar on the land is erased. The white blanket covers everything, smoothing out the world as if she had never existed at all. Decades pass. The frontier closes. The railroad brings brick buildings, churches, and families. The forts are decommissioned, their mission accomplished. They are turned into historic sites, protected by the government. The hog ranches, made of earth and wood, are dismantled or simply melt back into the prairie under the rain and snow. Tourists arrive in station wagons and then SUVs. They walk the parade grounds of Fort Laramie. They take pictures of the officers' quarters, marveling at the preserved furniture, the uniforms, the stories of bravery and cavalry charges. They look out at the empty fields surrounding the fort. A tour guide points toward the horizon. Over there, he might say with a chuckle, were the camp followers, the laundresses, a wild time. The tourists smile. The history has been sanitized. The horror has been polished into a quirky frontier anecdote, a bit of color to spice up the story of American expansion. Meanwhile, in the basement of a museum or a dusty county archive, a box sits on a shelf. Inside is a ledger. It is labeled simply Store Accounts, 1880. It smells of old paper and neglect. The pages are brittle. The names are still there, Mary, Sarah, Elizabeth, listed alongside the price of whiskey and coal. But the book remains closed. The human tragedy inside is mistaken for boring commerce. The evidence of the injustice is preserved, but the act itself is forgotten. The camera lingers on the empty prairie where the ranch once stood. The grass waves in the unending wind, tall and golden. It hides the depressions in the earth where the cribs used to be. It grows over the shallow graves of the women who never went home. The forts have monuments. The generals have statues. The women have nothing but the wind. The system didn't really disappear. It just changed its name. It moved from the sod houses of the plains to the back rooms of cities, adapting, evolving, but always keeping the same ledger. The belief that human beings can be bought, used, and discarded is a ghost that still haunts the machinery of our world. We hear the sound of a pen scratching on paper, loud, rhythmic, scratching like a claw. Then the heavy, final thud of a book slamming shut. The screen fades to black. If you want to help us open more of these books, to read the names that were meant to be forgotten, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments what other history should we dig up next, because the past isn't dead, it's just waiting for someone to turn the page.